question, okay? What has become your knowledge about the musical world? In other words, how do you see the musical world in our contemporary society? How do you see it in any society as far as it's being a part of humanity, a part of what we do? Are there any particular things that, and I know you've had some expertise, so what I might ask is how did you develop your musical authority? What was your background? What did you do, and how did you get involved in it in different ways, as I know you have?
Well, first was the record collection and cassette tape collection. Uh, just building on that, and then just as far as me playing, I ended up playing because Dad had a trumpet and didn't want to have to buy me a new instrument, so I played trumpet in the band in junior high. But I think that was mostly to get out of. Actually, I wanted to play the drums, but I guess when they sort out the kids, about half of them always want to play the drums, so they try to talk them into other things. Anyway, so I played the trumpet for a few years, but I didn't. It was mostly to be not in a classroom. I think at that age,
Okay.
my friends, hey, if you're in band, you can be in a band for an hour instead of reading a book. So I did that, and then a kid moved to town from Chicago that had an electric guitar, which I'd never touched before. Yeah, just this nice little Les Paul copy guitar, cheap copy, and a little amplifier, and I touched that, and that was the end of that. And I quit band, and back there we grow a lot of seed corn in the farms, and the kids go and detassel in the summer. So I worked all that summer to buy my first electric guitar, and I was off and running that. Now, as far as the background, and I think pretty much anybody in any profession, if they care about it, and especially the arts, if you hear me specifically, if I hear something I like, I'm like, it's occurred, how did they do that? Where did it come from? And then you find out, like, well, I'll use Zeppelin as an example. They pretty much just amped up a lot of old blues stuff, stole a lot of it too, got caught sometimes, had to pay up, but the blues that they did, it's converting Robert Johnson songs and Muddy Waters songs, and boy, the bass player from Chess Records, I can't think of his name right now. He wrote so many of the good blues songs. You see right where that comes from. And in those days, it was all those English bands, because here in America it was called race music, all the African American blues and jazz and stuff. They called them race records, and it was very separate here. But in England, it wasn't. There wasn't that divide. And like the Beatles, for example, lived in Liverpool, which was a port town, so they got access to all these American records, Buddy Holly and whatnot, and all the Stones and the Yardbirds and all these bands ate up all this American blues, and they did what they did with it and gave it back to us. And when they came to America, some of their interviews, they couldn't believe that American kids weren't into they were playing top dollar for these imported records from the South that none of the northern white kids could ever hear.
Interesting.
So all that stuff, they thought they were doing American music, and then they came here and nobody in white society was knowing that, because we got the God, who was the white guy? Not Perry Como, the other singer. We should do this in the evening. My brain works quicker.
Well, mine isn't quick enough to help you right now.
But
I get the timing.
For example, Little Richard would do Tutti Frutti and his songs, and I can't think of he's still out there singing. Maybe it'll come to me later, but they would cover those records by the black. They would just make them so vanilla and so, they would take the danger
out of it.
Pat Boone, that's what I was trying to think
Okay,
of.
all right,
He would cover
yeah.
all those songs. That's why when Elvis came out, a lot of people thought he was a black guy, because he did it like the people he grew up with.
Okay.
And that's what those English bands came over here and saw. It was like, wow, they've kind of dumbed it down for the masses. And then that's how that was the beginning of rock and roll there. And then there's the other side. There's the Bob Dylan and the folk music and the folk boom from the early, that predated the Beatles. And you know, when all that came together is when it really became an art form. And then and then when the businessmen took over in the 70s, it just, we've got what we've got now. There's not much of a music business as it were, because there's numbers guys, and that happened in every business, the musical instrument business, the saddle making business, when the corporations took over. Or just look at our cars from that era, 70s and 80s. They were, now at least we make good cars that'll last. For a while back then, they were pretty disposable American cars, and that's why the Japanese took over. I'm digressing from the music question.
Well, that's okay, but this is part of the history of music.
Yeah.
You know, I've had other guests who have said not the same thing, but have had similar experiences of seeing how our musical world has developed and what it is that influences it as it moves along. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate your talking about that, because some of that I would not have drawn a conclusion about, not, you know, knowing the musical world all that well, knowing it by experiencing it in a general way, but not really patterning it as you have. Okay, so that's quite an interesting sense of knowledge about the musical world.